Hello, mighty men of God. Dr. Joe Martin here with the Real Men Connect podcast, where we help good men become great men, and we do it God's way by helping them win at what matters most. And every week we interview some of the nation's most respected and accomplished men of faith to find out what it really takes to become the kind of husband, father, and spiritual leader God has called and created us to be. Each interview session is packed with practical, proven biblical principles you can immediately apply in your relationships, on your job, and in your community. Guys, today we have a special guest with us today. Let me just kind of get down to the nuts and bolts, guys. Fellas, buckle up because today's guest is not your average guy. All right? His name is James Dalton. James Dalton is a 20-year veteran in the high stakes world of cybersecurity software sales, which means he spent 2 decades outmaneuvering hackers, closing massive deals, and probably explaining to his in-laws for the 100th time what he actually does for a living. But let me tell you something. James isn't just a powerhouse in business. More importantly, he's a devoted husband, a committed father, and the most solid brothers in Christ that I know. That's right, he's a friend. He's been married to his incredible and beautiful wife, Anna, for 22 years. Together, they've raised three amazing kids, Gianna, Maya, and Lewis, while building a life rooted in their faith, family, and of course, some legendary backyard barbecue skills. Now, when James isn't conquering the cyber world, you can find him conquering the great outdoors. He says he loves everything from the beaches to the mountains. But don't let James' easygoing demeanor fool you. This man has gotten very serious about his faith, his family, and the mission of becoming the man God has called him to be. And that's exactly why I invited him on the show today. Guys, if you're new to the Real Men Connect podcast, let me fill you in. The Real Men Stories, that's what this is today, is a series that when we ditch the scripted interviews and we get raw, real, and unfiltered. No best-selling authors today, no celebrity pastors, just real men fighting real battles, following an extraordinary God. Guys, you've heard me talk about something called the Real Men 300. It's our private brotherhood where we help men in crisis win at what matters most when it comes to their faith, their marriage, their fatherhood, leadership, you name it. But instead of just telling you about it, I wanted you to hear it straight from the men who are living it. So today, James is pulling back the curtains on his struggles, his victories, and what it truly means to fight for your faith, your family, and your future. So, Warrior Nation, join me in welcoming my brother, my personal friend, and a fellow warrior in Christ, James Dalton. Welcome to the show, bro.
Hey, Dr. Joe, thank you so much. So happy to be here.
And James, we were talking before. You sent me your bio, and I said, "Yeah, I got it." I said, "I ain't going to read any of that." I said, "I'm going to share what I want to share on it." And so it didn't. That's not how you wrote it up, but that's
That
how I'm
is not
sharing
yours is way better than mine. I'm gonna have to borrow
it.
that from you sometime if I can. That was nice.
No,
I'll
but
take
James,
that.
seriously, man, I was telling you before we got on the show, we prayed before we got on here that we're over 940 episodes in, and I've got to interview some great men of God, even some women from all over the world who've done some amazing and marvelous things. But nothing gets me more excited other than interviewing my own family members and interviewing my brothers in the Real Men 300, the Real Men 300, because these stories, I know the background. Even though I'm
Yeah,
asking you all a lot of these questions, I know a lot of the answers to some of these questions that I'm be
yeah,
asking you. But the world doesn't know who you are, and I want to introduce them to you. But I treat you like any other guest, James, even though it's going to be very informal. And I can't wait because you and I are cut from the same cloth, and that's unfortunate based on our
yes,
history and our past.
yes, yeah,
But at the same time, it's comforting. It's
yeah,
comforting because you know you're not in alone in the fight. And I'm already guessing and knowing that what we're going to share and talk about today on the level we're going to be talking about it, James, it is
yeah,
going to
yeah,
bless men, transform their lives. And I'm telling you, guys, this is going to be a show you're probably going to listen to multiple times, or at least you're going to know a guy who needs to listen to this episode. And I'm saying that before we even do anything, because I just know how the Lord works, James. And I know too much about you, and you know too much about me for God not to do something special with this encounter today. So I'm looking forward to it, man.
yeah. Me too. Thank you. And I love the fact that it's called Real Men Connect. I know everything about this ministry, but today this is about being real. no masks, no, just keeping it 100% real. And that's where my life has changed, and that's where I'm hoping I could touch some other people for exactly that same reason.
We talk about the real men 300, but now we don't say even keep it 100. We say keep it 300.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how serious we are. But James,
Yeah.
let's jump right into it because I want to spend the rest of the time just getting into your story, man. But we always start by asking our guests their favorite Bible verse that gives them inspiration from the Word of God. I know your story, what you're about to share, but I wonder what is your go-to verse? I don't think I know what that is. What's been your go-to
Yeah.
verse or your life verse that you've been hanging on to, man?
Yeah, the truth is, I actually have a few go-to verses, as I'm sure a lot of men do, you and everybody else, but it's kind of crazy for me to say that I have a few go-to verses because I did not grow up in the church, right?
Hmm.
I never went to church. I didn't go to the church. We didn't talk about God in my house. If you asked me to spell scripture, I wouldn't be able to spell it if you offered me $100, right? So to go from that guy to say now I have a few go-to scriptures and is just amazing. Sundays for me growing up used to be about football, sleeping in, and cartoons, right? And I didn't step foot into a church until I was in my 20s. So it's kind of a wild story. But with that being said, I would say my go-to verse that's coming up for me right now is First Kings chapter 19, verse 7, which is arise and eat, else the journey will be too great for you. Right? Arise and eat, also journey will be too great for you. And the reason why is, Dr. Joe, in my life and in my story, we need to eat. We need fuel. We can't go anywhere. We can't do anything without fuel. And that looks different ways. And I just learned that I have to get up and get that fuel from God every single day. And that may look different, for different people. For me, it's my quiet time in the mornings. It's reading scriptures. It's praying. It's connecting with other guys to help give me encouragement or me to give them encouragement. And that could be, to yell, scream, cry, vent, just an ear to listen to, whatever the case may be. But I need to go to the Lord every single day because this thing called life is too dang hard. And I try to do it on my own and it doesn't work. I failed miserably at that. So, and I get up every day, and what does that look like for me is I got to go to the Lord every single day, but I need people around me to help me do that in order to maintain myself on this journey.
And James, what's impressive about what you're saying is you mentioned, first of all, you mentioned First Kings 19:7, which we've done over 900 some shows. Nobody ever gives me the same verse, which is amazing to me. When you think
Yeah.
about some of the most popular verses in the Bible, and I always love when people pull a verse, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that scripture. But to hear the
Yeah.
story behind it as well. But what's impressive to me, and you may not find it impressive, but what's impressive to me is you say that you didn't get into the church until you in your 20s. And
I
so
didn't
you
step
did
foot into a church until my
right
20s.
into your
Yep.
20s.
Yeah.
Most of us, even if we came from rough backgrounds like I did, or even came from better backgrounds, you always typical story you hear is that guys they grew up in the church. Hey man, mama had me, I heard somebody say I was a drug baby. Mama drugged me to church every Sunday. So I'm talking about ever since they were kids. My mom,
Yeah.
she pretty much threatened us to go to church or we couldn't go outside and
Yeah.
play. That's when kids actually
Yeah.
used to go outside and play,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the reason why I'm so impressed is because we grew up in the church. And you know how long it took us for it to start spending time regularly with God, reading the scripture and everything. And the thing you were never even exposed to that. You get into your 20s, and now as you're old now, you're doing that on a consistent basis. I know it doesn't seem like much, but there's people who've been following Jesus their whole life. They still haven't started doing that yet. And yet they'll say, I've been saved for 30, 40 years. And
Hmm.
so to me, to see somebody who's more of a newer believer, starting late in
Hmm.
life, to see
Oh
them
yeah. Yeah.
exercise those spiritual disciplines early is impressive to me because I know how hard it was, and I grew up in the church, and it took me until I was in my 30s, late 30s, before I started having
Hmm.
those disciplines that you have right now.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
want I want
Y-
to transition. Would you get ready to say something, James?
Well, I was just gonna say to that, honestly, the credit goes to my wife now, girlfriend then. But I can't even, if I'm gonna be real, I can't even say that was from a pure place.
Right.
right? In other words, she was a holy, devout woman, and I loved everything about her. She's like, "Hey, you should go to church." And I'm like, "All right, cool. I'm going to church with
Oh,
you."
so
You know,
so
like
you so you got into work because you wanted to get next to her. That's
kind of. I'll be honest with you. Like I believed in God. Don't get me wrong, but there was. I mean, I grew
right.
up single mom. You know, that just was not a part of my life. So I believed in God, but just didn't have that influence, that connection. I didn't have anybody in my life, no influences. You know, I was a single kid growing up on the streets. You know, doing all kinds of dumb stuff. But um. But she was one who sparked that. For the first time, there was
Mm.
somebody there to be like, you know, hey, this the guy. I'm like, yeah, and you want to go to church with me? So that's what got me into it. But as we'll get into, that was an amazing experience. But to go to church before truly practicing my faith,
Right.
that's a very different thing. But that's ultimately when I got into it. Then the story takes a lot of twists and turns before practicing and being consistent and dedicated to my life with Christ as I am today.
Well, let's start diving a little bit into it. But first of all, I mentioned that you're part, we're friends because you're part of this ministry. And
Yeah.
James, you've been around so long, I forgot how long you've even been here, man. It's been, how long has it been?
5 years, Dr.
Five
Joe.
years. It's been 5 years?
Yes,
Dang.
yes.
Well, I didn't know
Matter of
that.
fact, it was February, and I remember exactly when, but it was February of 2020. Now, I will say this again, keeping it real,
Right.
joining the Real Men 300 in regards to, yes, here's my monthly subscription fee versus joining the Real Men 300 with my heart,
Yeah,
mind,
putting your heart and
and
mind in
soul,
it.
very different things.
Well,
There was a lot of manipulation there that I was not using, right? So I was there, but I
but you
wasn't
weren't
there.
there. Yeah, I get
I wasn't there, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
So
let's start with
yeah.
this then, James. Tell me, how did you find us 5 years
Mm,
ago? How'd you find me? And what made you reach out?
yeah, yeah, good question. Um, well, so the situation that how I found you is very unfortunate in regards to my wife found a text message on my phone of an inappropriate text message exchange that I had with another woman. And I know we're going to get into the details on all of
Mhm.
this, but she found a message on my phone, very upset, very hurt, because, I committed a lot of adultery, quite honestly, right? So she found this message on my phone and she's like, all right, you need to get out of the house. Got out of the house, went to a hotel room for 2, 3 nights, and we just didn't have a lot of connection, and rightfully so, because she was very hurt and angry. Now, after that weekend, I ended up going on a business trip to San Francisco. Had to stay up there for a week. So I went from 3 nights in a hotel to this other trip.
Right.
So now we're talking 4 or 5 days, and I am deep in my sin and my shame at this point, but didn't even realize how deep I was. But it was just a really tough time. So I wanting to change. What is wrong with me? I can't believe I did this again. And the key word is again, because
Again.
part of her pain was 8 years prior to that she had found out about a one night stand that I had with a woman outside of the marriage. And we went through recovery on that. So here I
Mhm.
am repeating the same behavior with
Mhm.
just a text exchange. So I am on this trip and I'm walking the streets of San Francisco, just searching. I mean, I walked probably 10 miles that day and I'm looking for some information. What can I do for men, addiction, porn, you name it? And I came across your website and got some information. And that day, I just walked up and down the city with my headphones on. I listened to podcasts, I listened to stories, I was reading material, and I said, "Wow, there may actually be some hope for somebody like me. I didn't know that anything like this existed. There could be some relatability here." And then that's when I reached out for the initial breakthrough call with you, and then you and I
Mhm.
spoke, a couple days later, or the case may be. But that's ultimately how I found out about the group.
And James, you mentioned the breakthrough call because on our show, we always running these promos about, man, if you're going through something, reach out for a breakthrough call. And that's
Yeah.
usually how the guys started. They'll reach out and connect with me. Our connection is a little bit different because I'm going to give them more context of what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Um, we're in an unfortunate category that no man wants to be in if he's married, and that's being a serial adulterer. Adultery is bad. It's bad is in itself, but to be a multiple time offender is on another level. And I don't want the guys who are going through it. I'm talking about me and James here, how we look at it. And we talk real and we taught each other. Is a special kind of stupid. because we know what it does to the hearts of the women that we are married to and we love. And we're devastating them and we're shattering their self-esteem, but they don't understand that really it's not even about them. It's more so of
Right.
how bad we feel about ourselves
Exactly.
and what we're doing
Yeah.
ourselves. They just happen to unfortunately be the damage in the families that the fallout is the kids and everybody else. And so, yeah, when you were probably listening to the podcast and said, man, there's a guy like that who's like me and
Yeah.
he's doing this show. And yeah,
Yeah.
and we're not unicorns. We're out there. It's just that a lot of guys like us who've gone down that route, they're unwilling to reach out and be vulnerable, and let alone come on a show like this and be willing to
Yeah.
talk about it. So when Anna saw that text,
Hmm.
I found that text, and you guys had already had something before. At that time, how bad was it when it came to your affairs? Because my ex-wife, she, you notice, guys, I'm saying ex-wife. James' marriage survived it. Mine
Yeah.
didn't.
Thank you.
But
Praise be to God.
yeah, but as far as
Yeah.
how bad had it gotten
Mm.
that when she found out the second time?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Joe, I was so deep into my addiction, and my sin that that was the one she knew about. And I say the one.
Right, the one she.
Keyword there is serial. And, I was the triple whammy of addiction, right? I had battled with porn addiction.
Hmm.
I had battled with sex addiction, and I didn't even know that was a real thing,
Yeah, I
sex
didn't
addiction. I
either.
really
Yeah, I
didn't.
didn't
I
either.
didn't know
Yeah.
that was like, what? That's a real, thing.
I thought it was a
But then
joke. I thought people were using it as a joke, but
yeah.
it actually is real. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then, and the other thing, I also battled with alcohol addiction,
Hmm.
right? And I put my wife through crazy stuff, as you can imagine, while battling all of these. So, how bad was it? It was really bad, but I'm still also battling, these things within myself where I didn't know sex addiction was really a thing. Instead, what I'm just thinking of is there is something fundamentally wrong with me.
Hmm.
This is how I live. There is something fundamentally wrong with me. I am dirty. I am sick. I am gross. There is something wrong with me. I don't want to keep doing these things, but I do. And then the shame cycle begins. So to stop doing these things where I feel so bad, I get back in the cycle. Then I keep doing the things to ultimately make myself feel a little bit better, but then I immediately feel bad again, and then that cycle continues. So it was such a struggle because I wanted to stop. I did not want to keep behaving in this way. I did not want to keep causing the harm, but I honestly felt like at the same time I had no control, and then I'm carrying all these lies because I'm like, that's the one about
You know
several
about,
years
right,
ago,
right.
not to mention unfortunately the countless others.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it was
And,
tough.
and James, you're bringing flashbacks when I remember when after my wife had to discover I wasn't courageous enough and brave enough to tell her, which that's another one of my big regrets, is that even if we ended in divorce, I wish I would have come clean to tell her because you rather lose somebody you love with the truth than to continue to hurt them with a lie.
With the lie,
And like
100%.
you were saying before about not knowing or you just talking about the ones you know. And I
Yeah.
remember when I was trying to save my marriage and she started asking me how many has it been. Man, when she started talking numbers and I had to stop her,
Oh,
man. And she said,
yeah.
was it more than one? Was it more than 10? Was it more than 20? I said, please. I was begging, please. I said, I'll tell you the truth,
Yeah.
but I don't, I've done enough damage to you.
Yeah.
But when you say when it becomes countless, we have a serious, serious problem. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized sexual addiction was a real thing. It took my marriage being blown up and having to rebuild and God restoring me that I said, oh, this is serious. But now you mentioned that you didn't get into church until in your 20s. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the environment you came in, because I know with me, James, and maybe this is where our story kind of splits. With me, when I had to get the help for my addiction, and looking back, we realized that it had nothing. It's not really the sex and the
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
porn and all. It's
Yeah.
the trauma that
Right.
precedes it, and we're just choosing. You chose alcohol and sex as the medication, and I
Mm-hmm.
chose porn and sex and women as the medication.
Mm-hmm.
But I also realized that it came from also me being sexually abused
Mm-hmm.
as a child for three
Mm-hmm.
years,
Mm-hmm.
and which I tried to suppress. and pretend it
Yeah.
never happened, never told anybody until I was in my late 30s. And
Mm,
13 years into my marriage,
yeah.
this when I told my ex-wife, which now I'm thinking, what was I thinking? That's something a
Yeah.
woman needs to know before you get married to them, you know? And so I grew up in a very dysfunctional, traumatic ridden home. But with you, what was your home environment like that kind of set the stage for all this, you think?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, you said some key things there, right? It's not about the sex, it's not about the porn, it's not about the drugs, it's not about the alcohol, whatever the
Alcohol.
case may be. That's just the symptom. It's the
Mm-hmm.
symptom of a much deeper issue, and a deeper hole that's missing, right? And that was what I did. But growing up was pretty tough, right? My parents were married for 20 some odd years. And I have two older sisters. They're 11 and 12 years older than me. So meaning they're 1 year apart. And then you come to me and I'm, 10 or 11 years younger than them. But they grew up with both of my parents married, and my mom divorced my dad. So I was raised by a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, there was it was difficult. We moved to California, lived in Northern California, and she was working two, three jobs at one time just to take care of me. So she wasn't around a lot. And I grew up alone. I when I say I grew up on the streets, I really grew up on the streets with friends and just doing what you'll do on the streets when you have nowhere else to go ultimately. But we struggled financially tremendously. My mom never made more than minimum wage. So there was a lot of identity stuff that I had to deal with. You're going to bed hungry at times,
Yeah.
without a doubt. I was a kid bullied in school because my clothes didn't fit or because my teeth were really messed up, but we couldn't afford the dental stuff, dental help. But there was no positive role models along. There was no positive male figures, in my life. And where we lived in the ghetto of our area, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
was very normal to walk past the projects to go to school. It was very normal where there was drugs and gangs. It was very normal to see where the prostitutes were hanging out on the streets at night, and then I also, you know, and then I had to grow up really fast, really, really young. So that's how I grew up, just us. My father was nowhere in the picture. Try to reach out to him a couple of times, but there was this rejection and there was abandonment on that side, and he's got his stuff going on. So, there was struggle. There was a lot of struggle without a doubt on my own. So, and then I started working at 13 years old, and we can get into that, but then
Dang,
I never stopped. So
13.
bottom line, I had
Wow.
to grow up fast, man. I had to grow up really fast, really quick.
James, I can understand now why, after listening to the show, you would have reached out to me. Dude, we do have a lot of overlapping of having to grow up really, really fast. When you're in the inner city and growing up in the hood, and whether even in a rural community where if it's a single parent, you have a lot of weight put on your shoulder as a child. And at that same time, you mentioned the word trying to discover your identity, who you are.
Yeah,
And with you not having a dad there, my dad wasn't there either as well. And then you have a mom who's trying to make ends meet. Yeah, my sister used to steal food to feed us, man. I mean, it was bad. And all this while our identity is being shaped and formed. And for a man to come into my life to abuse me just messed it even worse because I'm already not knowing who I am as a man, as a boy growing into manhood. Now this is defining who I am. And like you
yeah,
said, going away you with a single mom, not having dad there, and then you got to go through all the stuff and the challenges with schools and the kids and the bully. You're losing a self identity. You have an identity crisis as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you can see and see a lot of times the people who we hurt the most with our addictions, they don't know where the root started,
yeah,
and where it all
yeah,
started. And it breaks my heart because nobody should have to endure what we put them through. But if you know the story behind somebody, you can show them a lot more compassion. Because
yeah,
if anything, what it's taught me is to forgive people a lot quicker and be
yeah,
less judgmental, if anything. But I want
yeah,
to ask you this though. When did you realize? Because Anna found out about the text and
yeah.
everything, and there was stuff she hadn't found out because eventually all this stuff had to come out. But when did you realize something had to change, like maybe a turning point for you? I remember mine like it was yesterday for
Yeah.
me. But what was it for you? I'll spare them the details of that. But what was for
Yeah.
you that you realized that, wait a minute. Now, maybe that didn't fix anything, but you realize
Yeah.
I'm gonna die if I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
change. If something doesn't change quick right
Yeah.
now, this is it. What was it for
Yeah,
you?
you bring up a good point. Like, when do you realize that you need to change versus when does the change actually happen?
Right, because the
Those are
change
those are two
happens come
different
down
things.
happen way later.
Right. And that's, unfortunately, part of
Mhm.
my story as well. I remember when I had to change because, again, my addiction got worse. I was a serial adulterer, and then it progressed so bad that I ended up having a 2-year emotional and physical affair with one woman in particular. And so, Dr. Joe, I was living a double life like you would never believe. I
Like I
mean,
would.
yeah, actually, yeah. Look, you could
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah. That's the only way
Yeah,
you can survive. You couldn't survive any other. You had to have these two lives going
it
on and
was
bouncing at the
literally
same
two
time.
lives.
Go
Or as I
ahead.
like to say, it was the worst Netflix movie possible, is
Yeah.
what my real life was. More importantly, for my wife and my family, for what I put them through.
Hmm.
And then I'll tell you later about how my disclosure, what that looked like, because that's an important part of all of this. But this is going on for 2 years, and I'm creating all kinds of havoc. I'm creating just miserable life, at work, at home, for
Hmm.
my wife, for my kids, for myself. I couldn't keep up with the lies. You have to
Yeah.
lie,
Yeah.
to lie,
Yeah.
to lie, to
Then
remember
remember
the
the
lie,
lies.
remember the lies, and I'm stealing, and I'm putting my wife through all this, and she's being tortured, so she has demands and feelings. And then the affair partner, she has demands and feelings. Then
Mhm.
the kids demands and feelings. And then even just with the crazy part is within myself, deep down inside, I'm like, you're better than this. What is wrong with you? Stop this. It wasn't like I didn't know that it was
Right. That it was
bad,
bad. Right. Right. Right.
but I couldn't control it. But it got so bad trying to keep up with it that I ultimately almost had a panic attack one day. I remember I'm sleeping in the loft above our garage because was creating some sort of hectic environment. My wife was like, "You go sleep up there right now." I give her plenty of reasons and excuses, and a lot of times I just lied to make excuses for me to sleep in a different room. To be
Right.
honest with
Right.
you.
Right. Right.
But whatever it was, I woke up one day and I was having a panic attack thinking about all the lies and all the emotions that I have to go through. And I said, this has to stop because I can't live like this anymore,
Mhm.
and I don't want to live like this anymore. But even then, it wasn't from this like I need to confess everything. It's just like I need help. I need to
Right.
stop
Yeah.
living
You
like
know
this
how you're
because
going to
there
get
is
the
no
help, but you know
future.
you needed help. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's when I realized enough. I need to stop this. Where do I go? What do I do? And that was kind of the beginning. But then again, it's a long journey from
Long
the
journey.
beginning of that realization to making it a reality to where I truly turned my life over.
No, James, it may you will relate to this, but it may sound trivial to somebody else. But I remember after, because right, it's a process. You're talking about 7 years of
Oh
recovery. I
yeah,
went through 3 years of
yeah,
counseling. People keep thinking, "Oh, you're going." Oh, well, it ain't no quick fix,
no,
because you got to do a
no,
lot of digging, a lot of disclosure, a lot of being honest for the first time ever. But and you can relate to this, and maybe people might think it's a little trivial thing. Do you know one of the greatest feelings that I had after all this, even after I lost everything? And I
yeah,
was now in recovery, I could finally stop lying.
yes,
I can't even describe
yes,
in words what that felt like. Just
yes.
saying, I don't have to remember anything just to tell the truth. And oh, I'll tell you another thing that made me feel so great. Not having to hide my computer
Oh,
and stuff. You know what I mean? Like anybody can come
yeah,
in and I
yeah,
don't have to jerk
yeah,
real quick, be
yeah,
nervous about
yeah,
what, and to have the kids know my passwords and it can
yeah.
go anywhere.
Oh,
It's a freedom. And you're like, ain't
oh,
no money involved in that. Then you ain't getting any benefit. But it's just, but when you've been suppressed and oppressed by the enemy so long, where you're trying to maintain, it's hard enough living one life. Try living two, at the same time
hmm,
with different
yeah,
people. It's
yeah,
it's exhausting mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, socially. And I'm not surprised that you had start having panic, anxiety attacks. I mean, you feel
yeah,
like wow, and it's even a relief when even though it may have destroyed your life, it's even a relief that finally I
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
keep doing this anymore. Even though I don't know how I'm gonna stop, I don't
Yeah.
have to keep lying about it anymore. I can finally at least get some help with it.
Yeah.
And so to
Well,
me,
it's that part that you're 100%. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
cut
go
you
ahead.
off. You're absolutely right on that realization, but before it comes to reality, because it's a boulder on my
Mhm.
chest, crushing me
Yeah,
every day,
crushing you. Feel like it's crushing you.
crushing you, squeezing the air out of you. But then to say, okay, I need to stop, and to get to the point like, okay, now I need to be real and be honest.
Mhm.
I was paralyzed with fear on what that looks like. I'm going
Mhm.
to tell my story. No, these secrets, these lies, these things I've done, I'm taking these to the grave with me,
Yeah.
has
Right.
always been the mentality. And
Mhm.
then I started to learn, wait, those secrets, those lies, those things I've done, that's what's sending me to the grave. Not that I'm going to take them with me. They're
Ain't that
sending them
something?
to me.
Yeah.
And so then that was a long process. And then even through that, there was a what we call the trickle disclosure. I'm gonna tell you some
Yeah.
stuff. I'll tell you
Yeah. A
80%
little
of
bit of
it,
here, a little bit there. Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit here, which is the worst thing you could absolutely do for your spouse. It was the worst thing I could have done for Anna because,
Mhm.
once we came to that point, and that was a journey to get there, you think I was hurting her before. Oh my gosh. There was nothing worse that there's something else. There's something else. There's something else.
It's death
And
by a thousand
oh,
cuts. That's what
exactly.
the slow
Exactly.
process of letting it, it's just you're just cutting them more
Yeah. Yeah.
as
And
opposed to,
and
hey,
then as you're truly trying to rebuild, there's a lot of work that's involved in rebuilding, but there's always that fear. What else is there? Because if you have that history, it's just going to make it harder. So, but the only way you can get there is you have to totally surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender. I really wasn't. I wanted to. I had the desire. Romans 7. I do what I don't want to do. I don't do what I do want to do. I mean, I couldn't get there, and that absolutely took a while. I'm gonna share something with you real quick that you
sure.
may not remember this. I told you this story shortly after we started talking, and you and I remember I was sitting in a in the gym parking lot one time. I was like, Dr. Joe, I need to say this stuff. I need to say this stuff, but I can't. I can't, and you were listening and um listen, we're a single family income. I'm gonna be broke, I'm gonna be homeless, I'm gonna lose everything, and then she's not gonna want me, da 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 da. And you said, will you stop catastrophizing stuff?
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
like, wait, what? And then we went through like you don't know what this is going to turn out to be. You don't know what God's plan is. You don't know any of these things, but we do know that you got to surrender to him. Like James, I'll never forget this visual. You are like Paul in jail right now. You are in jail, right? You have all these things going on. You have all these things. You have all these lies. You have all these things happening. But the difference is that door is wide open.
It's open. Yeah.
It's open.
It
You
ain't
can get up
locked.
and walk out of
Right. You
jail.
can
It
walk
ain't
out
locked. You're
anytime you
not
want
shackled in.
to.
Yeah. So all
I
these things
remember
that you're
that.
feeling, and it's like, oh my gosh, my life is over. And it's truly how I felt. Why wouldn't I? I mean, I'm talking 2 decades of betrayal that I have committed, and the worst. Like, I'm supposed to say that? No, 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 no. And then even then, I held on to that, but then it still took me a while to finally get up and walk out of that cell.
James, I get this picture because I remember telling you because I talked to a lot of guys about that about we're in a self-inflicted cage.
Right. Right.
We're in jail, but the door's not locked. And God said you can
Right.
walk out anytime you want. Now I just thought about this. Think about somebody who goes to jail. If they've committed a crime, more than likely their life is going to change, right? They're going to lose a lot.
Mhm.
And now they have to go to jail. Now, as much as they don't want to lose all that stuff, lost your house, your car, this. Oh, that's the worst thing. Oh, that's the worst thing happened. But then you got to go to jail on top of it.
Mhm.
What do you think they would say? Okay, if you gave them the option, okay, now you're going to jail, but you don't have to stay there. I know you can't get that stuff back, but you don't have to stay here. Do you
Mhm.
want to leave? What fool is going to say, yeah, no, I want to stay here
I want to
because I
say,
lost
right.
everything. I don't want to leave. But that's exactly what we do. We'll
Yeah.
stay there and look at everybody else walking out,
Yeah.
walking past. Hey, James, are you coming with us? No, I just want to sit here a little
No.
bit longer. Now, I just want to think about what my crime and what I've done. But you can walk
Yeah.
out of that cage anytime
Yeah.
you choose to do it. But James, you mentioned about catastrophizing. Now, in hindsight, looking back, what do you think was the scariest thing? Why? because we all struggle with that full disclosure, coming out,
Yeah.
telling the truth, being honest. What was the thing that scared you the most? I know there's a lot of things you were worried about losing, but what was the thing that scared you
Yeah.
the most more than anything else in being honest and authentic and vulnerable and telling the truth?
The thing that scared me the most was that I would be seen for who I really was. The
Mm.
mask comes off. Being quote unquote found out, right? You gotta remember, I was Mr. Personality. I had lots of energy. I was, a great sense of humor. All these different things. And in my mind, I think I was in control. That's funny. Looking back, was in
Yeah,
control of anything. Like,
that's
okay.
an illusion.
Uh, yeah, exactly. But I think one of the scariest things for any of us is to be seen for who we really are. Now, that's not who I am in regards to how God sees me.
Right.
That's not who I am in my identity, but the front is gone. The mask comes off, right? So outside of, okay, am I going to lose my wife and my kids are going to hate me? There's nothing to hide about because I had spent 40 years of my life hiding. Nobody knew what I was really feeling. Nobody knew what I was really thinking. Nobody knew what I was really doing. And
Right.
the thought of being exposed and being seen. So coming out of darkness into light, it's blinding. It could hurt, right? And now I'm truly going to be seen. And that was really scary for me. And then I could then catastrophize, right? What that really
What's
means.
that mean? Yeah.
Kids are never going to want to talk to me. Nobody's
Right.
going to want, I'll never get a job. I'm going to like all these different things. But it was really just stepping into the light and it paralyzed me, like truly paralyzed me before I could absolutely do it.
Now, isn't it something that we're trying to control the narrative of how our life is being played out? And it just shows you how out of control we really are. We're trying to control
Yeah,
something we can't
exactly.
control, which shows we're out of control. I remember for me, James, based on you grew up like I did, you would grow up with nothing. It was hard for me to accept this. And I know some guy maybe don't know understand what I'm saying, but we came from nothing. Okay. God blesses us with his grace and mercy to get us out of that situation. I don't wish poverty on anybody. And being of a single mom, which you're just scraping by. My mom, same with minimum wage, just barely getting by. We're starving, not eating, hand-me-downs, all this other stuff. And then to be able to have the success that quote, I'm putting that in air quotes,
Yeah,
success,
yeah, yeah,
where now you're not living in the hood anymore. You're able to
yeah.
take care of your mom and help them out. I was able to move my mom out of the projects, you know what I mean? To be able to help your family. And you say, God, look how God has blessed me. And then blesses you with a family
Hmm.
and gives you this. But because we haven't dealt with our junk,
Yeah,
we blow that up.
yeah,
What
yeah,
was bothering me about being honest and coming out like, how do I explain having nothing, giving everything, and then
yeah,
revert back to blowing it all up and sabotaging it? And
yeah,
it was coming to grips with that people gonna feel sorry, but they're gonna look at me, judge me, feel sorry for
yeah,
me. Oh, and here's that cautionary tale. Don't
yeah,
be like that dude. And
yeah,
all that stuff, like you're saying, is playing around in your head, and you're thinking about that, thinking you can control the narrative the way you want it to be, not realizing that all we're doing is trying to find our identity in everything else but Christ.
yeah. And that's so critical. And I mean, I did not grow up with that, so there was no positive influence to understand. But you're hitting it. It is understanding identity because, where I came from, wasn't supposed to have the success, quote unquote success that you have. I mean, again, I started working at 13 years old on a golf course. I put myself through college, just because I was looking at our shack. I would lie to people about where we lived. We lived in a
Well, I did the
tiny little
same thing. Yeah.
shack at the end of this driveway, tucked behind a corner. I didn't want anybody to know where I lived. And if something happened or somebody needed to know, I would lie. Oh yeah, drop me off up at the corner.
Mhm.
I'm over there. Um, and I had to buy my own clothes and to work to buy my own car. I didn't have a childhood, all right, because I
Mhm.
was working throughout high school. I'm working 38 hours a week. I'd go to school 7:45 to 2:45, then work 3 to 11 at a 7-Eleven convenience store, right? And I mean, so there was just so much that was missing. So then at the end of the day, because my identity was so messed up, I didn't think I deserved anything good. So when I would start to get good things like a
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
loving wife, beautiful
Right.
children. I mean, dude, my family, it looks like the ultimate. Hallmark Christmas card. I'm like, that is a beautiful family. I mean, my wife, my kids. I'm like, but I don't deserve
I
them.
don't deserve that. Right,
I
right.
didn't deserve to buy a house where I bought at that time on the Monterey Peninsula, have the job, travel the world, learn a
Mhm.
foreign language, all these things. That does, and I destroyed it all because of who my identity was. Like, you are not deserving of that. You're not loving it. And I didn't know how to receive it. I didn't know how to accept it. I didn't know how to manage it. So then I would do unwanted, unwillingly, but I just
Yeah,
kept doing all these things to
unconsciously
destroy
you're
that,
sabotaging yourself.
sabotaging it. Yeah. And it wasn't until, kind of bring this full circle back to here, it wasn't until I was truly ready to lose everything
Yeah, until
that
you're
I
ready to lose it all,
gained
that you
everything.
got it.
I literally said, God, I'm done. I'm willing. I want to save my wife, whom I love very much, even
Mhm.
though my actions don't show it. That's another thing that you spend a
Right.
lot of time on. How
Right.
could you hurt somebody? But that goes to the deeper stuff, and there's a lot of therapy work we do on that today. But it wasn't really until then, to when I got up out of my moment to get out of the cell and walk out, is when I said, it's all yours. I don't know what's going to happen with a job, if I'm going to have a job, if I'm not, with my wife. As much as
Mhm.
I'd love to save this marriage, I'm sure it's not going to happen. My kids, I want my kids. I didn't have my father around at all. I want a relationship with my kids. All
Mhm.
these things. I'm going to live under a bridge, Dr. Joe, in California somewhere, right? When
Yeah.
all this goes, it wasn't until I said, God, it's yours, that I literally felt him say, great. You ready to grab my hand now? Let's go do this thing called life. You done trying to do it your way? I got you, and I've always been here for you, but now you're ready to step out. And through that, and all these years, later, going through all the recovery work that we're doing, is when that identity has changed, that belief system has changed, and it is a lot of work today. And it's not always easy work in any way, shape, or form, but it is the most worthwhile, beautiful, amazing work to actually receive. And he's giving me everything that I was like, it's gonna be gone. More than I deserve. I deserve death. He has given me so much life, it's not even funny.
It's funny you mentioned that, James, because in the Real Men 300, when we get guys who've been, they're at the beginning where we are, where we were,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're looking at, how life is unfair and how things are working out. They're losing all this, they're losing all that. And then you ask them, okay, are you guilty of what you've done? Oh, yeah, I am guilty. So what do you think you deserve? I don't deserve to be married. I don't deserve their love. I don't deserve their respect. I said, you saying all that, but you know what you truly deserve? And you said it just now, James, death.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Absolutely.
you're serving the God that we talk about, he said the
Hmm.
wages of sin is death.
Hmm.
But the gift of God is eternal life for those who believe in him. Now I want to ask you because I didn't know it's been 5 years, James, but what role do you think the Real Men 300 has played in your development and success? You've gone through a lot of work, even beyond what we've been able to help you with. But
Oh yeah, yeah.
what role did we play in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, a major part, a Real Man Connect is one of the tools in my toolbox to help me
Hmm.
walk this life of sobriety and betrayal, trauma, and redemption, and of my life and of my marriage today. But to simplify it, it's in the name, connection is
Hmm.
one area. Real men connect. I never connected with anybody. I didn't know what it was like to either to have positive role models in my life, to understand the importance of connecting. Again, it goes back, to the scripture that was saying, arise and eat, or else the journey will be too great for you. The Real Men Connect has provided that community, that brotherhood, that relatability, and the accountability that comes with that. Something that I liked in my life majorly. I had no accountability. Who was I accountable to? Nobody. But there's that accountability from other men who want to lift you up and help you get to heaven and walk this journey with you. From our weekly calls and the Brothers Keepers meetings, there's all these things that we do, but it is that connection. Men need men. Men are under attack like no other time in our life and our culture, as husbands, as fathers, and there's so much pressure on us that we think we just got to put our head down and go handle business. Men need men, and Real Men Connect. This fellowship has helped me gain friends. I can't say I had friends before, like
Hmm.
true friends, but that connection with the other men in this group and the accountability that comes with it. all looking towards the same thing, which is to God to help lift each other up, has been absolutely critical in my life.
And it's sobering and humbling for me to hear stuff like that because I know what God called me to and called me from to start this ministry. And that was what my aim was, to be able to have some give guys a place they can go to, a safe place where they could share, be real, be authentic. Because I know when I stepped to my first recovery group meeting, I just know the weight that was lifted off my shoulder, even though I wasn't healed and I wasn't in a great place. The fact that I didn't have to be ashamed anymore,
Right.
talk about what I was struggling with and going through.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want to miss a meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
I told him, I said, man, if I'm not here on Monday nights at 7 p.m., I remember I did it for 7 years, Monday nights at 7 p.m. If I'm not here, check the morgue, call the jail, and check the hospital. Something happened to me. I said,
Yeah.
and it got to a point that I was doing it. I was so committed to it that my son, I was a single dad at the time because I had joint custody of him. That's the only thing I had left was joint custody of my son.
Mm,
Even he reminded me, Dad, isn't it your meeting tonight? And there he was on like
mm.
10. And then he said, is your meeting tonight? Which is another a quick transition I want to go to.
Yeah.
I told you my marriage, the guys, my marriage
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
survive it. Um,
Yeah.
and I know this don't sound crazy, James. I harbored anger towards her because she wouldn't forgive me and she wouldn't take me back. She wouldn't take me in. And I realized how crazy that was now in hindsight. Because I wanted mercy, and I found out she did forgive me. She just wasn't wanted to be married to me anymore.
Yeah.
Because there's a
Yeah.
difference between forgiveness and trust. You
Yeah.
can give forgiveness should be given unconditionally because we're commanded to do it.
Yeah.
But trust has to be built. And if it can be
Yeah.
destroyed, it has to be rebuilt. And
All
so
over
I
again. Yeah.
realized now, as I started to get healing and start learning more about my addiction, I started having a lot more compassion for what I did to her. And what people don't see, that the people who we hurt the most end up usually being the biggest heroes in our tragedy. Your wife, Anna,
Mm.
I've
Man.
never met her personally, but I know we've talked a lot about Anna and what she's going through to
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
her while she's going
Yeah.
through. And she's truly the hero in all of this
Oh,
because the hell that she's gone through, man. I mean, I'm not even married to my ex-wife, and I still pray for her for what I've done to her,
yeah.
But she has gone through a lot, and I'll let it be her story to tell. And who knows, maybe Anna may one day, because she had to give you permission to come on this show to talk to
Oh,
me.
yeah.
But
Oh,
I
yeah.
would love to talk to Anna and have Anna on the show. Maybe both of you guys, because we've had husband and wives come and
Yeah.
talk about this kind of thing before. But to get her side, because I know a lot of women can relate, but we know that she obviously has walked a very tumultuous journey,
Oh,
and she's still going through it. She's still healing through it. But I want you to
100%.
speak to the other three, the kids. How
Okay.
have they? I know what my son went through,
Yeah.
but with your children, with Gianna and Maya and Lewis, how? Because I haven't talked much to you about that. How have they
Yeah.
dealt with all of this?
Yeah. Great question. And first off, I want to affirm and thank you for calling out my wife on this. I say for people who don't believe in God, I'm like
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Yeah,
I
there
got, I
is a
got two.
God.
There is a God. I will say there's two ways that God exists. If you don't believe him. First off, if you have kids,
Yeah.
okay, if we have kids, people fertility is not an easy thing, and the bottom line is there is so much that can go wrong
Hmm.
to have a child, and this child is growing in your womb. I mean, it is truly the miracle of birth. There's so much going on. I'm like, God is in that because I know a lot of people who had struggles or whatnot. And number two, it is only by holy and divine intervention that my wife is walking this journey with me. And that's it, and she'll tell you that's not from her. That's coming from
Yeah, it's
God.
got to
Right?
be God. It's the grace of
It's
God.
it 1000%. Well, I mean, it is 100%. But yeah, she's amazing, and for still dealing with me, and that talks to the testament of her faith and to and to her belief in marriage, the vows that we took,
Mhm.
right? But to the kids, yeah, the kids are doing really well, man. They're doing amazing actually. But it started with radical honesty, right? I mentioned a full disclosure, and,
Mhm.
and I say this for any men that are listening. If you're hearing this and struggling with it, there has to come to a point where you have to let it out. You have to confess. You absolutely do. I do. For me personally, I don't believe because there's still going to be that, well, you don't know me. You know how many times I'd have people tell me, I love you. It could be my wife, it could be my kids, it could be an in-law. I love you. And I'm like, yeah, but
Yeah, but
you
if you
don't
only
really
knew
know
me,
me.
yeah, but
If
if
you
you really
only
knew
knew
me,
me.
yeah, yeah.
And the devil will work that
Mhm.
overtime in your head. See, that's the thing. You don't really know me. And then when you're hiding and you're holding these secrets and you don't, tell your story, that's always going to be there, right? There is not going to be a sanctification if you're holding on. And I hated that feeling. This is the first time after coming all the way out. But I did a full disclosure with my wife as well as I did with my kids. Now, this was the right way to do this. I did my disclosure through this organization in Texas called Daring Ventures. Shout out to Dr. Jake Porter, right? It's a center coupled recovery, and the bottom line is, it took about 3 months in which I wrote my disclosure with the help of a counselor. I had my counselor, my work, she had hers, and I wrote a 17-page disclosure of
17.
every 17 pages
Wow.
of everything that I did. Right? You talked about numbers earlier. We're talking numbers, we're talking locations, we're talking names, everything I could possibly remember to get it all out there. And with the help, and again, it's a very organized way to do this. And it took me 3 hours, I think, 2 hours, 3 hours to read it. And man, was I terrified, but we got through it. And it was not easy. And at the end of it, it's hard for me to not get emotional about this. This is the first time that I became known. The woman I love the most, the mother of my children, the first
Mhm.
time I said all these things. And at the end of it, she stood up, tears down her face, and she walked over to me and she thanked me.
Wow.
She thanked
Wow.
she thanked me. I ripped this woman's heart out of her
Mhm.
chest,
Mhm.
then stomped on it and spit on it and crushed it. Hated so much that I'm really not crazy. And he really was doing these things and all these different things, right? And then I immediately followed that with a lie detector test,
Wow.
and which there were more questions. So bottom line, everything was out there, and now the work really begins, right? And we've been doing this for 3 years later. And but it started with that to truly say this. When I said, God, you got this, not me. God, you got this, not me. Now, sorry for that long-winded answer. To answer your question about the kids, I did the same thing with my kids, Dr. Joe.
Wow.
I wrote a full disclosure to my children. Now, more age
Yeah,
appropriate,
age appropriate.
right? Right language, not all the gory details or
Mhm.
whatnot to them. We sat at the kitchen table and it started with that. And I spent a lot of time. I had some help in the right way to do this, but the kids needed to know. Why
Mhm.
was dad living? I was living outside of the house, right? Why
Mhm.
is dad kicked out of the house for 6 months? We didn't even
Mhm.
talk about that part of the story. I was outside of the house as we started, the recovery. But it was that radical honesty with them to validate things they have heard or seen or were feeling,
Right.
but then to also provide them. And now here's the plan of how mom and dad are going to rebuild this thing. They needed to see some safety and structure and what this looks like and where are we going with that. And we did that. There were tears, and that was hard, but each one of them thanked me as well.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
gave me a hug. They know all about my recovery groups. They know all about my therapy sessions. They know all about the intensives that I've done, the family of origin work I'm doing, the the inner child. They know everything about it. And it is the closest, most beautiful, authentic, real relationship I could ever imagine. And that's with my kids. And they because they know me. I don't have to look at them and hug them anymore and say, "Yeah, but if you only
You only knew me.
knew me."
Yeah.
And I'm so blessed beyond belief because they know their dad's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but they know their dad. And they know their dad loves them and is here for them. And I literally said the generational sin stops with me. But
Mhm.
adultery, alcoholism, all of this stuff that I've done is rampant on both sides of my family, my mom and my dad. And I said, it stops with me. And we have such an amazing relationship that, again, I don't deserve it, but the Lord has willed it and blessed it. So
And James, and I
yeah,
appreciate you sharing that, and because I wanted to go because we fail to see how it impacts the kids, the ripple effects. But I like what you mentioned too, that not only they had to go through this thing that you took them through, they didn't ask for this, but at the same time, they're seeing you step up as a man to break these generational curses and everything. And man, there's no better feeling than to be actually known and people accept you and love you for who you are. I remember when I became a single dad, one of the it was so weird. I became a better dad afterwards
yeah,
than
yeah,
before, which made no sense to
yeah,
me. And I realized that because one, I wasn't living this double life, and I was able to tell my son the truth about things. We didn't go through the formal full disclosure, but whatever he had, nothing was off limits for him to ask. And he was free to be able to express his emotions. And he would tell me he's angry, he's mad at me, and he would cry and he asked, and I let him do it. And I talked to him about it. But and I'm telling you this, Jamie, you've heard me mention this before. This ministry is really tough for me a lot of times. And I'm trying to make sure I don't get emotional.
mm,
It's tough for me because I know what I've done and where I've been and who I've done it to. And God called me to this ministry, and I work with so many men, including you and all those men who I've seen what they've gone through and what they've taken their wives through. And I'm like, my marriage didn't survive. And I remember walking with you, James, through a lot of this stuff.
yeah.
Even when I had to
You
get
were a
hard and when I had to get
huge
tough on
part of
you
this.
and rough
Oh,
hard on you, like, dude, what you doing? Because you thought it was so unfair or what you had to go through as a result of all of this
oh
stuff.
man.
Remember those days?
I think back to some of those conversations. Now, mind you, with you, and I've done again a lot of work. I did a lot of therapy and still do, right? There's her recovery, my recovery, our recovery. But I
Yeah.
think back to some of those times. Dr. Joe, you ain't gonna believe she's making me do this or she said this or whatnot. And man, I love the reality check. You're like, boy, let me tell you something.
What you talking about?
You are not the victim.
You are not the victim
Excuse
here.
me? You are not the victim. You mad because she's giving you latitude or whatnot. And I mean, I look back, I'm
I, I
like,
I
man,
remember those talks.
praise God, I've grown a little bit since then because there were times I was easy to point the finger back at her instead of realizing I caused this.
But
Right.
James,
And what she needs, I need to meet her with, I need to display empathy and patience and
yeah,
grace and like what
grace
she's
yeah,
given me.
yeah. What
Oh
is she
man.
giving you exactly?
Stop,
And
stop.
James, I'm only human, and I know it doesn't sound good, kind of out of my mouth, but I know doing this ministry, I just look at the marriages that have been restored and how they
Oh yeah,
bounced back.
yeah,
And James, I'm still human. I'm like,
yeah,
why couldn't that have been my
yeah,
marriage?
yeah,
All this stuff I know and what I've been through and all the people I help, God, why not me?
yeah,
And so I guess that's why I'm so vested in it because I can't ever restore that. But boy, I can get the joy of seeing your marriages restored.
yeah,
God has given me a second
yeah,
chance, and I've told people that, it took my wife some time to kind of digest it. I said, Tanya, you're not my current wife said, you're not God's best for me.
mm, mm,
My ex-wife was God's best. You're
mm.
God's grace towards me that I don't deserve.
Wow.
And you can still cling to God's best. You haven't been the best husband and done the best
Yeah,
things, but you still have God's best for you. And to me, I get a joy. It's like there's that jealousy part of it, but there's more joy than jealousy because it's me
yeah,
second guessing, questioning God. God, why couldn't you have done that for
yeah,
me? Why couldn't
yeah,
I have a wife with the heart of Anna? You see what I mean?
yeah,
That
yeah,
would, but at the same time, God knows what He's doing, and even though we are disobedient, He doesn't need us to accomplish His mission, but He invites us to come along and co-labor with Him to do it. And He's allowed me, even in my hurt, in my past, in my trauma, my mistakes, in the whatever, to be able to be here to help you guys. And already, James, I'm looking at we're running out of time. I can't believe the time is going by so fast. But I want to see if I can squeeze in a couple of questions,
sure.
um, real quick for you. How would you compare your old life? Then I think I already know what you're going to say already. How would you compare your old life to how you used to be to how you are now? We're talking about now 5 years after we've met and Real Men
Yeah.
Connect, Real Men 300. what you've been doing with therapy and counselors and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Describe to me the difference now between the old you and the new you.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think in its most simplest form, death versus resurrection. But the
Hmm.
easiest way I can put it. My old life was death. I was living for myself. Had no idea what my identity was. I was swallowed in shame. I was a pathological liar. I only cared about me and serving me. And that is just complete darkness. And versus today, man, I love and depend on the Lord. I wake up every day with the humility to realize that I'm only one decision away every single day from screwing up my entire
From
life
the
again.
whole life.
I'm one decision away, right? And I think that's important, remember, because I don't want to go back to that old guy. I don't want to be that old husband. I don't want to be that old father or whatnot. So now it is a life of transparency, of honesty, of commitment, of humility, of dedication, and of work to get to heaven, and to just glorify God. And that comes into fight for my marriage. And again, trust me, if Anna was here right now, there is not a day that there was not a trigger. There's
Right.
not a song that comes on the radio, a TV show, a commercial, a billboard that we don't pass because of all the damage that I've done
Hmm.
that doesn't trigger stuff, which can hurt feelings and she can get angry and all these different things that happens. But
Right.
my life today is about repairing the rupture that I caused
Mm.
for my life instead of let me just go hide and make myself feel better. I don't live for
Right.
myself
Right.
anymore.
Right. You will,
And
you
it's
know what
such a
I'm hearing,
blessing.
you're willing to do the work that
Oh, you
of,
have to have
of
one
repair.
1000%. Well, yeah, absolutely every day. Every day.
Well, James, what I can tell you is, man, I'm so proud of you. I've watched you grow over all these years, man, and I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud of you of, it wasn't easy and it still ain't easy. And you guys are still not out of it yet. But
No.
I've watched you grow just in leaps and bounds. But I want to close by having you now speak directly to somebody out there listening to this episode, this show. Um, because they're listening to your story, to hear my story, they see the fallout, um, and they see the damage. They can relate to the stories of what we've been through and how what we chose to medicate. But what if there's a guy there who found himself in the same situation or a similar situation, or maybe headed down that path, but he's thinking to himself, I just don't know if I could reach out to guys like you did, James, to be able to come full disclosure and to be able to tell my wife and to be able to be transparent and open, to be able to trust men with my secrets. You don't understand how I've been hurt and abused in the past and people who've betrayed my trust and rejected me and abandoned me. And I know, yeah, you and Joe, I'm happy for you. I just don't know if I could ever get to that point. I can do what you guys did and just coming clean. Well, I want you to speak to him, James. What would you say to him based on your experience and the journey you've traveled?
I'm tearing up just thinking about that because I was that guy,
Hmm.
right? And I'm thinking about how I thought and what I believed, back then. If I was to speak to that guy right now, I would tell and encourage that person, yes, you can. Trust in the Lord. You got to go to him, but you are loved. Jesus died on that cross, and his blood was shed. Yes, even for you.
Hmm.
Yes, even you are called by name. Yes, even you are known by every hair on your head. Yes, Jesus died for even you. And his death can be your redemption. His resurrection can be your redemption. It's going to be the scariest thing in the world, but use me as an example to say it is possible. If you want to live a life, if you want to get that boulder off your chest, if you want air in your lungs, if you want to be able to stop the generational sin for your own kids, if you have kids, if you
Hmm.
want to make a change, take that first step forward. Grab on to God's hand because he will protect you. He will hold you in his arms. He will bring that cloak around you. His will prevail. And I don't know what that his will is. None of us do. We don't know ultimately where things gonna end up, but we do know that this life is not easy. Nobody ever promised an easy life. There's going to be suffering, but do we want to suffer alone with the enemy, or do we want to have God help us with our suffering? I want to encourage you. You're not alone. You are not the things that the enemy wants to say that you are. None of that is truth. Believe in that. Take that first step forward, and there is a tremendous brotherhood around you to help you realize you are loved and you are already forgiven. Come out of the darkness into the light, and you will be rewarded one way or another. That I can promise.
James, that is beautiful, man. That is beautiful. Guys, I can't say it any better than what James said. You know, you guys hear the promos about setting a breakthrough call, the Real Men 300. Guys, we're not just saying this because it sounds good.
I wish I
We've
believed
we've been
it
to
much
hell.
earlier.
We've
Yeah.
been to hell. We've been to hell, and God snatched us out of it. And we're telling you that we couldn't do it by ourselves.
No.
We needed God's help, and then we needed some godly men to help us. Guys, we come to the end of our show, but you don't have to worry. We'll be back to do it again next week with a new guest, new insights, new lessons. So make sure you don't miss it. But guys, please, I don't even think I have to beg you to do this. Help me thank my brother in Christ, my brother from another mother, James Dalton, for joining us today and being so gracious with his time. James, thank you, man, for you never probably even imagined 5 years ago that you'd be on my show doing this.
No way.
But
No way.
thank you, man, from the bottom of my heart, and for the listeners out there who will hear this wherever they may listen to it. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule, man, to do this. I really appreciate it, brother. Love you, man, so much.
I love you, Dr. Joe. Thank you. You are such an integral part in this ministry of my recovery, and it continues every day, So I thank you tremendously for what you do, and I love you and thank you for the time today. God bless you.
Now, James, we know that you're not a public figure, but if
Yeah.
they wanted to reach out to
Yeah.
you, if some guy out there, listen, man, I wonder if I can talk to that guy or I can reach out to him. What is the best way for them to connect with you if they wanted to reach out to you? You have an email address you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So feel free, guys, to email me. My email address is jrdalton. That's D as a Delta, Alton as a Nancy, 413 at gmail.com. Once again, jrdalton413 at gmail.com. And if you want text is easier, I can give my phone number as well,
It's
Dr.
up
Joe.
to
I'm not
you if
public
you want
figure.
to.
Yeah,
Everybody knows my number, but you
yeah.
want
You can
to.
also reach my cell phone is area code 650-279-6471 is my cell phone number. So text me. And if I can be help in any way, shape, or form, please. I'm determined to believe that in some way God wants to do good with my story, which the devil meant for bad. And it's a pleasure to be here and be happy to help in any way to let you know it is possible to rebuild trust after adultery.
And James, you know that it quickens your recovery the more you're able to help other people through theirs.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
when you hear guys give out their number or email address, don't think that the enemy wants you to think, oh, they're too busy. No way. I can't reach out to that person. They're not. No, 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 no. This James is also doing it to help himself too. This holds him accountable. This strengthens him.
Yes.
It puts some purpose behind his pain, and
Yes.
it helps him to persevere and to keep going this route and not quitting and giving up when the going gets tough. So guys,
Yep.
this show, I told James when we came on the show, if all I could do in this ministry was do this show, this is what I would do because it feeds me, it strengthens me, but it ain't just about me. But we'll put all that contact information in the show notes, James, so they'll be able to reach out to you. You will have your number there as well as your
Oh,
email
great.
address. And guys, thank you for listening. And if you like today's show, which I'm pretty sure you do because I enjoyed it today, please do us a favor. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. This is what we call our Real Men Stories, where we bring on members from our own ministry and our organization, like James, to talk about what they've gone through in their testimony. But we release an episode every Monday and Wednesday. So more importantly, but make sure, take about 30 seconds and share the podcast. what James shared today, you do not want to keep this for yourself. Share with a friend or family member who you love, care about, who may be struggling by living a double life, and they want to stop, and they want to be true to themselves and true to God and true to their families. Guys, it's the easiest way to bless them and the best way to help us get this program in the hands, ears, and hearts of men just like you. Because who knows, the episode you share could be an answer to some man's prayer. So please don't keep it a secret. Hit that share button and bless someone today. Until next time, I'm Joe Martin, your man builder with realmenconnect.com, reminding you that we are males by birth, but we are men by choice. So each and every day, choose to be the man that God has called and created you to be, because a male is a terrible, terrible thing to waste. So until next time, stay strong, stay blessed, stay connected, because real men do connect. But most importantly, stay in God's grip, and we'll talk to you soon.